Blessed love, this is Ras Jesse from Line of Judah, House of Rastafari. Just want to give everybody an update. It's July 10th, 2025. I'm over here in Kenya right now. It's been a while since I did a video, but everything is still good with me for everybody that's following. Yeah, so our case right now is at the point where last time I left off is the court hadn't even acknowledged to listen to or entertain any argument that deals with the First Amendment, freedom of religion, Wisconsin Constitution, freedom of religion, sacramental cannabis, constitutional cannabis. And not only that, but they were trying to push us into a trial where we were not allowed to bring up anything regarding sacramental use, constitutional use. So they wanted to have a state-controlled narrative at the trial, which left no argument for constitutional arguments. So and they told me I can go to that trial by myself with no lawyer, because the judge, person acting as a judge, Ellen Burrs, she told my lawyer at the court and on the hearing before the trial that he can withdraw. And he said that he has to withdraw because she's not going to allow him to file any motions on my behalf or represent any defense that has anything to do with constitutional issues, sacramental cannabis on a federal or a state level. So this is the same woman that recently is coming off getting suspended from the bench for some infamous behavior that landed her in the newspaper. A couple other cases where she was put before the Judicial Commission and reprimanded for pretty much lawless behavior, unlawful behavior, chasing people out of the courtroom to hospitals to try to arrest them herself, only to turn around back in shame, and other instances of you can read about on the news. It's really easy to see on Google search. In any case, so me right now, I'm waiting for that case to come forward with the next phase of it that has to do with bringing all those issues on an appeal on the fact that none of those issues were allowed to be talked about prior to the trial. So that's what happens when they deny you due process. And for a lot of people that are into this, you can study. And there's a famous case with Bobby Seale, if anybody knows that case from Chicago, where it's a real famous case where these issues were already brought forth to the courts before, and in such a way where they made a movie about it. You can check it out. But it's basically where the courts deny your due process. They don't give you any trial. They just create a narrative without constitutional rights or due process and no ability to represent those things that are constitutional issues in a fake narrative court that doesn't have jurisdiction but is like a fraudulent court. And so, long story short, there's a whole bunch of paperwork that goes on, and I've been dealing with my paperwork now. It's been even longer, but on this case, it's been since 2019. So it's been almost 6 years now. And so I'm at the point now where they're supposed to appoint me a lawyer. The same people that denied me due process in that system, the same judge is now constitutionally bound, which hasn't mattered much in the past, but to basically appoint me a counsel that will litigate all those same issues that she refused to hear in her court. She has to appoint somebody to litigate all those things, which are issues that put her actually in a liability. So it doesn't even really serve her interest to put somebody on my case that would get to the bottom of all those issues where she trespassed on my constitutional rights, because that would make her possibly, in trouble or liable. So in any case, that's what's going on in the state court. So none of the issues have been litigated. All the questions about constitutional cannabis, all that, it was dismissed with unlawful due process without a hearing to have a test that's called a strict scrutiny test that's done when a constitutional issue like freedom of religion is raised, and all the precedent regarding entheogens and herbs, plants, or sacrament that people have used and do use. All those cases pretty much tell you so clearly that it follows a strict court pattern whereby constitutional rights are given the utmost respect, not thrown under the ground and refused to address and talk about. So all those things are yet to even be heard. And the same time, in the federal court that's been going on since about 2019 or 2020, in that court also, I've been waiting for at least 2 years since my last filing that was to put me in the appeals process on that one, as that case was also dismissed without any rationale, specifically telling me that I haven't exhausted all my means on the lower court for a potential remedy, even though I had all the way been to the Supreme Court in Wisconsin twice. So there's nothing else to exhaust for remedies after that. So in any case, not if you're looking for due process to have a fair trial. So they haven't never ruled on that, and I've been waiting 2 years to get that one to push in federal court, which is the basic foundation of what has this whole case clarified, and where the liability rests for those people that unlawfully arrested and shut a church down and did disrespectful things in the media that caused harm and loss. And so, yeah, so here we are waiting. I'm over here in Kenya at the moment. So I just had a baby, in fact, too. So another boy. I got 4 boys now. And so things are good with me, and life is good otherwise. But I also wanted to touch on one thing that I just kind of picked up on some other brothers talking about. And I just wanted to make a follow-up on it. So to Ross Iodonis over there at Line of Judah Society, and I know you got a couple pages. I'll give a shout out at the end of this and put your link on there. And another brother had called in, and they were reasoning about Candace Owens also, who, if anybody's been following in the news, Candace Owens has had a lot of coverage and also a lot of controversy over the last 4 or more years regarding conservative and also political, religious, and cultural, Semitic, all different types of issues, And so originally also, the way that I observed Candace Owens in the beginning was some years ago, listening to a lot of her points, and sometimes seeing that there was a point behind it, but not always expressed with a good vibe or a good intention, and in a way that was aligning with the bigger picture, which I wanted to address. So what I just saw in this video that people were posting is regarding Candace Owens' pitch number 1 and how she's changed, and specifically some of the recent talks that we're dealing with, which is the 1948 establishment of the Israel state that you see, or the Israeli government, or what a lot of people have come to recognize being is a zionist state. If you don't know what that means, it's a biblical term that has to do somewhat with nationalism. And so, like America, people are born here. You have you have like America. You want to defend your country in such a way where your country's not at the bottom and losing. You don't want to do it in a bad way, but everybody wants the place that they're from to have some type of surviving, living in a civilized, fruitful way, existing, peacefully. So with that narrative, what happened is in the 1948 and before 1948 is what I wanted to address. So before 1948, there was already a place where it was Israel. There was for lack of a better word, people that they called Jews or Jewish, or specifically those people from the tribe of Judah and the tribes of Israel. And they lived in Ethiopia. And there was a kingdom there from those same tribes and kings coming from Judah. The king of Judah lived there. The king of Zion, the king of Ethiopia was that person, was that king, was that man. So for a long time, going back to the days of, you can read about in the Kebra Nagast, there's, and even in the Bible, the story of the Queen of Sheba, the Queen of the South, which is the Queen of Ethiopia. And it tells you a story about her meeting with Solomon, and then the Ethiopian Bible and the tradition and the bloodline and the history and the culture and the language, the people and the king's list and the kings and the wars and the peace and the scriptures and the whole story has been in Ethiopia for thousands of years, going back more recent description of the times of King David and then King Solomon. And then King Solomon inheriting the kingdom of David, which is the kingdom of Judah, the king of Israel. And so that kingdom given to David and then passed on to Solomon. And so now here's something. If you search the scriptures, you'll see two different stories of the Christ, the Messiah, Yeshua, Yahusha, Jesus, Yasu, by all the names that you know him, and other names, Isho, and the Muslims and people, some call them Isa, or Yasa, or Yasus. So he has two genealogies. You can check those genealogies when you open up the Bible, and you'll see one of those compared to the other one has a different lineage. So you go back and you trace it and you go read them and you see where it says David. And then you read, one of them goes to Solomon, then one of them goes to Nathan. So if you remember, he had two sons, right? So now both of them are his lineage, but he was said to only have the lineage of his mother. So the other lineage being Joseph's lineage, not necessarily Yahusha's lineage. So now that one, you can see the one that traced back to his mother, although they were both named for Joseph, but the lineage that does trace back to his mother through Mary, that one goes through Nathan. And then the one that went through Joseph, that one is listed with a king in that listing that you'll research and find was never supposed to sit, none of his descendants would ever sit on the throne. So his bloodline, although being from David's bloodline, someone had did something in the past that put his bloodline out of contention for sitting on the throne for forever, apparently. So that was Joseph, though. So now Joseph maybe himself couldn't sit on that throne, but Joseph not being the paternal father of Messiah, he versus Mary. Now Mary gave him a different bloodline, but that bloodline came through Nathan, David's son Nathan, who had a different revelation to fulfill, other than Solomon, which Solomon had his own revelation to fulfill, as those things play out in a prophetic way, even when you read in Revelations and the different scriptures that tell you after what happened. Solomon lost his kingdom, the same kingdom of Judah, the king of the Jews, king of Israel, from the male lineage. Now, in the place that was created in 1948, there's first of all, a requirement that it comes from a female lineage. So that can't be the male heir of David's throne, the king of the Jews, you see? And then secondly, the place over there, those people that are calling themselves Jews or Jewish, many of them are different than other ones, is the first thing you need to know. Because there's people over there that identify as Jews, and they're not for the state of Israel and the national state or the country they don't support. And yet they are Jews. And there's others that are more nationalistic. And so, in any case, the nation of the Jews, and who rules the Jews, the king of the Jews, is a big narrative, and who is the one that is the one for that nation to be sitting on that nation and representing it. So to the male lineage in Ethiopia, we have the king of the Jews, and he's a Christian, you see, from the original Christianity that predates the Roman Christianity. It predates Islam. It's the place that the Islamic Prophet Muhammad sent the first ummah, the first nation of his small remnant of people. He sent them to Ethiopia first, and that's when the Islamic calendar starts. And there was many different versions of the Quran that were recorded in those times, from different languages even. And it's said that the oldest and the most pure Quranic scriptures that were recorded at those times were written in Ethiopic text, an Ethiopic Shemitic language, a Semitic language. So these are the Semites. They come from Shem, the king from David, the Shemite. These are the real Semites, the Shemites, and the real Christians, but not necessarily having to be known as Christians. They maintained a heritage and a church. Originally, people were not even called Christians. So there's a form of life and following a way of the Christ or the Messiah that existed prior to having a name even called, people being called Christians. If you look in the scripture in the book of Acts, it'll tell you that Paul, there's controversy around Paul, but Paul was supposed to be accused of something. He was being accused of being a ringleader of a sect of the Nazarenes or the Nazarites. And so that was stirring up trouble. Now, if that's how they identified him, you'll see later on, Paul went with Priscilla and Aquila, and they went to go trim their hair because they had fulfilled a vow. and there was a Nazarite vow, you see, and they were had the appearance of Nazarites, Nazarenes. If you look at the vow that's in the book of Numbers, chapter 6 or 11, yeah, check it out. It'll tell you the Nazarite vow, and it's that's the one that brought in like Samson with not cutting your hair, and Elijah and different people. So that's an ancient priestly way of life. Some people connect them with the Essenes, there's connected with like people that were practicing the first forms of Christianity, not necessarily going into a church, but living like house to house, where 2 or 3 or more are gathered, even in any place, in the wilderness, in a house, in a place to eat, in any place, you know. So the idea of church came into it, and the church played a role in preserving a lot of the stories and the tradition, and even the church is only defined by where 2 or 3 or more are gathered. But there's a nation where that has been preserved in its purest form, Ethiopia, where the king of the Jews from the male lineage, the Shemite, from Solomon, the other lineage of David. So there's 2 lineages, remember? So in the last days, it says the Queen of the South, the Messiah said, the Queen of the South will rise up in judgment against this wicked generation, for she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon, and behold, a greater than Solomon is here, and you refuse to listen. So the greater than Solomon, the Queen of the South, the Queen of the South being Ethiopia, the nation of Ethiopia, the Queen of the South. And the king of the Queen of the South is the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah, the light of the world that we bear witness, was called by many names and many titles and crowns for many years, over 40 years on the throne, representing on the world stage at the first League of Nations of the world, and then followed by the United Nations of the world. Cameras and pictures, TV, radio, for the first time in the early 1900s when these things were happening. Every eye could see, every ear could hear, even from the east unto the west. Like a thief in the night, gone and out before you even realized what happened. So someone sat on the throne over there, King of the Jews, Lion of Judah. They said, what's his name? Rastafari Makonnen, son of a great man and part of the Ethiopian family of the house of David. And so in those times, you can read more about how those situations played out in the early 1900s and follow up for reasoning. But what happened is, after thousands of years, the 225th descendant of Solomon and David was on the throne of Ethiopia, representing at the League in the World of Nations as the King of Zion, the King of Israel, the King of the Jews, a place where for thousands of years those same remnant of Judah, of the Yehudi, the Jews, where those people already lived and had a nation. You see? And the beautiful thing about it is it was a Christ-based nation. It wasn't a place where, according to their scriptures, says that the Christ, Yahusha, who came in his Father's name, Yahuwah, it doesn't say in the scriptures that he was burning in feces in hell. You see, the people that are representing that side are controlling a narrative about what Zion is and who is Shemitic. Zion is also a place where David's firstborn and his kingdom is. Zion, the kingdom of Zion, David's land, David's city. Zion, the place where the king of that bloodline of the Israelites, of the Jews, lives. And guess what? Even a Christian king. And there's peace there, primarily, or at least attempts to have peace and bring people in for asylum, like the Muslims, like the first Christians, and like the ancient tribes of Israel into Ethiopia, the asylum, asylum, not an insane asylum, but in a place where you have asylum and you're being given a place to live and refuge, flee from persecution from people that are trying to harm you when you don't wish no harm. And so that place has been an ancient civilization. And the people there, if you look at them, they look different than a lot of people in Africa. They have a much lighter skin from a lot of people coming to take asylum there. And it's like a rainbow, all different nations. And they have a more brown skin. And it's an African country and an African people and an African history of taking in people into home and civilization, giving them asylum and a place where there's a king who rules with justice in that place, from the teachings of Christ, from the lineage of David, the king of Zion, the king of Judah, from Shem, from David, from his son Solomon, and Solomon's son with the queen of Sheba, named Menelek. Her name was, in Islam, they call her Bilqis. And in Ethiopic, her name is Makeda. And this is the same one that's mentioned in the book, I believe in the book of Acts, where the queen, the eunuch, the Ethiopian eunuch, the first person baptized after the resurrection, went back to the queen of Ethiopia. They call it Candace, but it's Kandaki. So that same woman is a queen that was living in a different time in Ethiopia. That was where the queendom was. And there was a group of Africans from the Queen of Sheba that had a kingdom. And it was the queen that would rule that kingdom. But when she met Solomon, she said when they had a son that the king will be the only one to rule her country from ever forward. And she had a son named Menelek, and he became the ruler of Ethiopia, and he inherited the throne of his fathers, Solomon and David. And from that time on, they kept a lineage of kings ruling in Ethiopia under that kingdom. At first, they were Hebrews, Israelites, Shemites from the house of David. And other tribes of Israel came there for asylum. And in later times, they were the first nation to accept Christ, the original Christian house, church, people. Ethiopia, queen of the south, will stand up in judgment in these last times. You see? So that same queen of the south stood up in judgment at the League of Nations and the United Nations, Haile Selassie I. And that's the king of Judah. And this is something that the Christians particularly are either naive, arrogant, or unaware about. And many of them, especially in the West, don't know the story of Ethiopia's Christianity or Judeo-Christianity, Islamic connection as well. So the Rastafari people are some of the best people teaching that, and a lot of people have contributed who are doing their research across all different intelligent minds. So when you look into it, the Kebra Nagast is a good book to read, but I wanted to just stress that point, which is that when we're talking about the nation of Israel, and many Christians feel they have an obligation to be loyal to Israel because the Bible says so. And in their mind, they think Israel is this place where these people who don't accept Christ and who don't have any connection to the male lineage of David stay. So keep that in your mind as you also think about who does. And bless up to everybody who's out there. Much love, respect. Lion of Judah, House of Rastafari.